God has constructed the world in such a way that autonomous reasoning and thinking leads to futility and darkness, and that He's the light. And that's really the problem, is people don't want to rely on God, who supplies, everything. They want everything God supplies: meaning, purpose, reason, intelligibility. They just don't want God as the starting ultimate origin point for these things. But He's
Yeah, I guess I
constructed
see
the
it
world
just
so
from the
that
other side.
He's constructed the world that the denial of Him, you just lead to futile thinking. Like it says, where's the wise man, where's the scribe, where's the debater of this age? For since in the wisdom of God, the world through its wisdom did not come to know God. For it pleased God,
Yeah,
yes,
I guess I see it
through
almost reversed.
autonomous
The exact.
reasoning, they don't come to know God. You have to start with God to understand He supplies everything.
But I mean, I guess I get it. It's from that standpoint. I see how early people would think about these things and go, "Gosh, how is this possible?" And from that, I could see how gods or God was invented, quote unquote, to just put it totally blasphemous. But um, the what was I going to
So it
say?
took a mind to. So you admit that it took mind and intentionality to create God. So to
Well,
create
it took,
things,
yeah,
you
thoughtful
just simply
reflection. Yeah.
need mind and intentionality to create things. And so that shows you that
Uh,
God exists, because there could not
to
be anything exist without an internal, rational uh,
to
creator
well,
mind.
not necessarily. Yeah. Um, it's thinking about. Yeah, I don't know. I see what you're saying, but I feel like it's kind of moving categories or something
No,
to that effect. Because
no, just
I guess yeah, once you get you know, and that's why I ask, like, how many layers up do we have to go? Because for me to operate in this world, to live in this world, and it seems like my experience with other people and how we interact, like, and truth and what I know and what I can say that I know, seems to all we seem to all work together um, in a kind of a grander scheme of things. Um, but uh, but yeah, it's like, at what level does that? It only falls. It seems like it only falls apart in the mind, in a philosophical conversation, or at least has implications on what kind of actions or choices you choose to do based upon your beliefs and stuff.
it seems to me, and as nice as a guy as you are, um, and you've been, and seem to be a little bit. I've had conversated with you that what it ultimately is, and this because I'm a Christian, I'd have to go with scriptures, is that people are ultimately, for whatever reason, in some type of autonomous rebellion against God. And of course, I would have, when I say whatever reason, I mean whatever personal reason, not the ultimate, the fall of man, all that. And that God has come into the world and He's provided light, which is simply, like I said, which is just um, just means that there's understanding, that there's intelligibility to life, and the denial of it leads to darkness. And it's almost like, if I can't come to these things myself with my own autonomous reasoning, and I have to get it from this origin point, who is God, then I won't accept it, and I'd rather be in the darkness and kind of speculate about the nature of reality than actually have the answer. Not that we have exhaustive answers about everything, and you know that, but in
Well,
the
I guess, yeah.
acceptance of
What
God,
speculation are I doing?
hmm, well, about it, like every atheist is ultimately going to be speculating about the ultimate nature of reality.
So what? I mean, I guess what at what level does that become? Does that have any boots on the ground kind of? What is that going to do other than, again, just kind of form,
Well, yeah,
your
what us
belief
as
system?
Christians, like when we appeal to Romans 1, where it says the invisible attributes of God are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, so that people are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not glorify Him as God, nor were they thankful, but they became futile in their speculations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, they become fools. And it's just speaking about the origin point, the ultimate that provides for everything.
Well, I always
Matrix
consider
goes.
close-minded people fools.
If you weren't, let's say if you could, for the sake of the conversation, imagine that you were not a Christian. Like what practical effect would that have on your life? I think that's what Ardberg's getting at.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
really? Oh,
yeah. I mean, I love my kids. I you know,
yeah.
you love your kids.
Just no
How
basis
are
for
we,
any of it.
loving them differently? Other than if we just go all the way up to the ultimate,
Yeah.
I'm not ultimately loving them. So what? Okay, fine. But you and I are still loving them in the same way, and so I don't understand.
It would be to actually have an intelligibility and a basis for your love, where God is ultimate, and you know the Bible pretty well when I was talking with you, where it says God is love. So that's one of the attributes of God. So God is love, God is ultimate. So what's ultimate in the worldview is love, since God is love, and so we actually have a foundation, a basis for something that's transcendent, because God is transcendent and eternal. But from a worldview of an atheism, it's just a chemical reaction, no different than passing gas or your favorite cereal. It's different in maybe the way it chemically reacts, but any value placed on it is just subjective,
Wow.
and it's subjective, and it's just another process of chemical reactions producing that value.
But it's not.
You couldn't give intelligibility of how it's actually meaningful, how it's actually viable, how it actually.
Ultimately, I couldn't, but I could give all the reasons why that probably most anybody, if you ask them, why do you love your kids?
Oh, you love your kids. I'm sure you do. And it's just, what we're saying is it's just inconsistent, incoherent from a worldview without God to say that it has any value or transcendence. We believe it does.
Well,
And I do believe
I
that you
wouldn't
do for your
actually give a
kids.
shit what you think about me loving my kids. For a person to say things like that you're saying is to be hypocrite and
How so?
just egoistical.
How so? I'm not saying that I do believe he loves his kids,
Bastard.
and I believe it's a transcendent love, and it does have value and all those things, but it's because it's consistent with the worldview that supplies God, who has the necessary precondition of love as an attribute to provide intelligibility to that experience in life,
The
to
more
the
you
nature of
talk, the
reality.
more I see you as a
If you don't have
cultist,
a foundation and
not a
ultimacy, hold
religious
on,
person.
ultimacy to interpret what love actually means, then it doesn't mean anything in a worldview where you're just a biochemical organic meat sack producing a chemical reaction, and the byproduct is a warm fuzzy that we labeled it and called it love.
Right. I don't believe that. So,
What?
and
Yeah.
but you have to go a couple layers higher, and or sideways. And that's what I was talking about a while back. Like, if we want to talk about the mechanisms by which I love, and the material reason why, then we can, then that's where that would come in. But I guess I I would still say, because of relationships and
Well, yeah.
and the fact that they were my offspring, that I care for them more than most
Sure, I'm sure you do.
people.
But again, the consistency, because without a supernatural God who has love, and that's an attribute, and you're just matter in motion, you're just biochemical chemicals, and your sole entity without any absolute to appeal to for any standard of what love would even mean or be. It's just, again, it feels very
Yeah.
real, doesn't it? But that's because you live in God's world, and you instinctively know that there's something valuable to love beyond chemical reactions. It's not consistent in your worldview to say, oh, it's just chemical reactions. But if we examine the worldview and break it down and extract material matter in motion without soul and spirit and transcendent value, what is there? And then speculating. I don't mean to be that, but that's just what happens when you turn off the light.
If I turn off the light, I just see things as just matter in motion,
Well,
and essentially
no,
become a
there's no
nihilist.
answer, and there's just ultimate speculation about why love could ultimately have any value or purpose, or where its origin point would be.
That's why I ask non-Christians that very question, or to that end, why aren't you a nihilist? I mean, for real. If anybody's not a
Well, I
Christian,
mean, to be a
why
nihilist, then
isn't
we
that
would
you're
have
not
to be
up
like
upon?
you, like Christians, because to have this narrow-minded ideology about other people is just fucking, you know,
Well,
psychopath.
you don't accept
It's just like
Christianity, so isn't that
evil.
wouldn't that be
It's like
considered
evil.
narrow-minded not to not accept? Because we're not accepting something, right? You're not accepting Christianity. Is that because are you narrow-minded?
No, when I'm talking about person here, and it's just like to have, to think like this about another, human being, which is supposed to be your, brother or your, fellow man, and think like this about him and his
No, no,
kids
no.
is
We
just
haven't said anything.
No, no,
No,
no,
no, no,
no.
no, 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 no,
Yeah,
no, no, no. That's not at
yeah.
all what's been said. Well, we've been talking about matters of
Right. What we're
principles. Okay, matters, issues of principle. We've been talking about
right.
his worldview. Okay, this has nothing to do with him. Look. I was an atheist for 30 years. I know what it's like to be out here without a light, as Truth Speller would put it. I mean, you've got to come to
yeah.
your own conclusions. The reach of your intellect has got to be the standard for what is truth, if you're going to have any truth
No,
at all.
yeah,
Saying
Joy, you might have
to
missed the
say
point.
things
Joy, you missed the
like
point
that,
because
they're evil. You gotta be evil
Joy, hold
person.
on real quick, and then I want to hear what you have to say. But you missed the point, and I don't want you to think that I think you or him. What I'm saying is, our worldview, a Christian worldview, actually supplies real transcendent meaning and purpose, ultimate purpose for love, since God is ultimate and He has ultimate purpose. He's love.
Yes,
Hold
that's
on.
your word.
But what we're saying is that when we step into your worldview and examine the end result of what the conclusions and implications would lead to.
You couldn't actually think about my
Oh yeah,
worldview. Your
it's
intellect
easy to
your
identify.
intellect would not allow it because it's closed-minded. It's very narrow. So how can you know about my worldview? You're just you're only concerned about
No, that's not
yours.
true. That's why have learned about atheism and continue to learn about it because it's identifiable and it's we can explain and look at it and see if it supplies preconditions or just absolute darkness.
Oh, so you're basing something on evidence, basing something that it's observable, and practical, and um, maybe um, you can think about it, you can see, you can talk about it. So basically, what you're saying, you believe in things that have to be observed as things that we do. So how come your thing is different than mine? How come you observing something is different than I'm when I observe
Because
something?
my ability to observe something is ultimately dependent upon an ultimacy and an origin point that would provide my ability to see, to be able to be rational, to have observation.
But who? I mean, just think about who would say such things. What kind of grown man would say things that you just said to another grown
Uh,
man? I mean,
I don't find that he said anything wrong. I'm not sure what the outrage is, to be honest with
you're
you.
not independent, Joy. Joy,
no, I
even in
mean
your worldview,
to say
Joy.
to
Hold
say
on,
this,
Joy. Joy.
you
Even in
would
your
have to
worldview,
be
Joy.
egoistical,
Joy. Joy. Joy.
narcissistical
Joy. Even
psychopath.
in your worldview, you're not independent of an ultimacy that's providing for your ability to observe, your ability to see, your ability to be rational, your ability to have life, your ability to have love, your ability to have personhood, all the things that you see around you, the laws of logic, the uniformity of nature, everything you enjoy. There's something ultimate that's ultimately providing for everything, right? Do you disagree with that?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure if I can understand actually
Well,
what you're
that
saying.
you believe in cause and effect, right?
Well, yes,
Yeah, so
of
there's
course. Who doesn't?
for any effect, there has to be a cause, and there's has to be an ultimate cause for every effect.
I don't know. I don't know about the ultimate
Well,
cause.
absolutely, because if you that's incoherence to say, well, there's no ultimate cause, then you're literally saying there's an effect without a cause. That's incoherent.
I don't know. Only to say something that you know nothing about to be, a truth and a fact. It's just so. Like I said, it's just very,
No,
very
it's you. That's what
hypocritical.
we pointed out is that you can't know any fact because facts are dependent upon an ultimate context to provide the ultimate interpretation for the nature of reality. Since you don't have any context, you don't have what
I
like
mean, it's kind of hard to
if I gave
understand
you a
you because
baseless
you're
fact, you wouldn't like it. You'd say, I don't
you're
like baseless facts or baseless information. That's the unbeliever worldview.
no, I what I don't like
Well,
evil people.
evil is not something that would be in your worldview because you just have biochemical reactions without an absolute objective moral standard to appeal to.
There you go. This is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying.
How is that not true, Joy? I mean, are you a materialist? I mean, is Truth Speller misrepresenting your worldview? Because you're not a Christian, clearly. You appeal a lot to our senses and what we can see. So I take it that your epistemology is related to your perceptions, right? So you're probably an empiricist to some
Hold on,
degree.
hold
But
on.
I mean, you're
How
talking about knowing things.
related to your senses? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just talking about you right now.
No, but I'm talking about like is your epistemology is not based on your senses.
Not no no not entirely. Yeah, I
Well,
think a
but not
strictly
entirely.
I think look, to be fair, I think a strictly empirical epistemology is incoherent and self-refuting. Okay. Likewise, I think a strictly rational epistemology is incoherent and self-refuting. I think there's a that only in the Christian philosophy is there unity between the two. Right. We can be rational and we can be empirical.
Right.
Right. But that has to be founded on something other than
Right.
just rationality and
What makes
empiricism.
sense of the proposition of observation and and things like that to be able to be rational, you have to have an ultimacy that provides for that. And you don't, right? So if you accept the fact that you're rational with arbitrarily without any basis for it.
No, I actually think about it. I think about it. I think if I'm rational or not. At times I'm not rational and I was mistaken. In your case, you could never
No, in
come to
your
that
case, you could
conclusion.
never know what's rational because rationality would have to depend on an ultimate context
Hence my
to
point
actually
again.
say what rational, like in the movie Matrix, there would be, would it be rational to jump off a
I
building?
mean, just imagine this guy constantly mentioning the
I know
movie,
that's why,
the fucking
Jeff. I
movie,
know that's why
science fiction
always say
movie,
I won't use it anymore.
comparing it
That's
to
why I always say I
reality.
don't, because some people, it's very easy to distinguish and not have a problem with it, but people do overuse
No, I
it
mean that's plenty enough
in
for
other
me to
ways.
understand. And what said before and after, so I understand what kind of person you are and
What
what
kind
you're
of
saying.
person?
It's just like
Well,
to me,
you
it's
don't know what
funny.
kind of person. Yeah.
Keep it
Well,
civil.
this is Plan B, right? When you can't give an argumentation to supply context for facts to give interpretation to the actual nature of reality. That's why you got mad
That's
about.
not
This
matter
is
to
why you
me.
got mad
What's
about the
matter
Matrix. Is
my
because I'm pointing out that you
what
don't
I
know
think
what's
is not
rational.
Joy,
You
Joy,
don't know
Joy,
what's
you're out of line, dude.
ultimately.
You're over
You don't know
talking
what's
me.
ultimately
Sorry to
rational. Just
cut you
like
off.
the people in the movie didn't know what was ultimately rational. They could jump off a building if their mind was right, and they had their mind formed to what the actual nature of reality is. And so you don't know what's actually rational because rationality depends on the context to give
There you go.
interpretation to
That's
what
what
the
I'm saying.
nature of reality
But
is,
you
something you
do.
don't have. You just appreciate.
There you go. But you do.
Not
You're always
always.
rational. It's only rationalism that can be, and other people like unlike you, they don't. They're insane. They don't
Not
know
I'm
what
not
they're
always
talking
rational,
about.
but that's not an
So
argument against a Christian position or a defeater. A defeater
wait a
against
minute.
anything
You're
I
not.
said in any way,
You're
shape,
not
or
always
form.
rational. Wait a minute. Did you just say that you're
No,
not
I don't
always
think that I'm
rational?
exhaustively, infallibly rational you know, um, on everything that I do in life. I would be God. Whoa, are you?
Whoa. Wait a
Are
minute.
you? But there's some,
Well,
well,
I don't understand.
there's
I
some
mean,
things that we
I just
cannot be
don't
wrong
understand this.
about. But there's not, doesn't mean that we're right about everything.
but now you're
No, I'm
changing
not
your
changing my position.
position,
That
I
my
guess.
position was never that I was infallible with exhaustible knowledge. Because,
Oh,
you know,
so
because
okay. Wow, I don't understand.
well,
You're
because I don't have
confusing me now
exhaustible
because
rational
I
knowledge,
think that
or exhaustible knowledge, I could act in a way that's irrational at points. But it doesn't mean that doesn't by default follow that. Well, he's always he's always
wow,
irrational.
wow.
Hey, look. The fact that you're confused. The fact that you're confused is no fault of Truth Speller. Okay, it,
So hold on a
it's
second.
no
Hold on.
fault of
If
Truth
you're
Speller.
not
I assure you.
always rational, hold on. So if you're not always rational, could this mean that what you're saying might not be rational?
No,
Maybe this belief of yours
that's what
may
I'm
not.
saying. There's some
It's
things that
maybe
you
it's
know
not
that you
rational.
can't be wrong about, but it doesn't mean that by default.
So there are 100% things that are 100%.
Say that again. I
So you
Yes.
believe that there are
Certainties, yeah,
100%
like yeah, or
truth.
100%, yeah, like a truth. Does God exist? Yeah, it's 100% truthful that God exists.
But also if there are 100% truth, that that means that it could be 100% true
No,
that God might not
because
exist.
that would be a contradiction in terms if I was to say he was 100% could exist. Now, if I said 99.9% he could exist, but there's a 1%. No,
Well,
no,
then
no, no.
then
You got to
you're
listen. Let me
changing your
finish. If I
position
said there
too.
was a 99.9% chance that he did exist, then you could say that.
I'm not sure, but I think if you think that you're not always rational, could be that you might not be rational when
So
you're
that it
saying that.
follows that if I am not um that if I'm not rational 100% exhaustively and infallibly, then I can never be rational at all.
Well, then you don't know when you can be
No,
rational or not. Maybe because things like that. Maybe you're not rational.
no,
When you
I
say
don't have
the
no.
bus is yellow.
Yeah, I know. I don't have schizophrenia. I don't have schizophrenia. I don't know what, what you're trying to say here. There's are
Well,
you
I don't
okay? Well,
know.
let me ask
You
you
said that
then. Are
you're not
you
always
always? Are
rational.
you Joy? Are you Joy? Yeah, yeah. I know.
I was going to say,
Joy, right?
flip this table around, man, because here. Well, okay, look, we freely admit that as Christians, we're not rational 100% of the time. We don't. In order to be 100% rational about it, you would have to pretty much be omniscient. Is how I feel about it. We admit that we're fallible and we're finite creatures, and that we're dependent upon God if we're to have any kind of true knowledge. But the same holds true for you. You're finite in an oftentimes irrational creature, right?
Right.
So how do you overcome your irrationality, right? You
Right.
have no mechanism to overcome your irrationality. At least in our Christian worldview, we have a mechanism, provided that we stand on the Word of God as truth. But you don't have a mechanism to overcome your own irrationality. So you pointing the finger at Truth Speller and saying, "Well, you
Right.
admit that
It would
you're
only
irrational."
follow.
That's no
Yeah,
gotcha.
Joy.
I didn't
I
say
mean,
that.
we admit that
Right,
we're
Joy. What he's
irrational.
saying
That's why
is,
we
it
depend
would
upon
only
God.
follow then from what you're
Well,
saying.
I know,
Then
but
it follows that you're just as irrational, and there's no conclusions that you offer or provide that I should listen. And I already accept that because again, you're in darkness. But
well, I mean, we were talking about you, and you
no, I
suddenly
never,
actually,
I never changed.
changed
I
your
never
mind.
said
You
I had
said,
exhaustible and
"Well,
fallible knowledge.
because see, the thing is, your basis, your everything that you're saying it comes from a believe in this God. So if you're saying that you might be mistaken,
Right,
that means
Joy.
that you
Right,
might be
Joy.
mistaken.
So
What
that's
you're
your
saying about
argumentation. So let's point that
God,
barrel back at you. Oh, Joy, let me finish. Joy, let me finish.
and your
Let's
God
point that
maybe is
barrel
not
back at
perfect.
you. And since you're an irrational creature that doesn't infallibly and exhaustively make rational decisions, then there's no conclusion that you can provide right now or in the future that can be foundationally trustworthy in any way, shape, or form. So the conversation is over according to you and what your logic has provided.
Well, well, I mean that's what you're saying, but you might not be right.
But you might not be right, right? You can't know, right? Because it only follows in your worldview. If you're irrational at one point in your life, if you've ever been irrational, then
Well, then
you'll always and
how can you say that
infallibly and exhaustively be irrational. That doesn't follow, man. You need to find another point. This is this.
well, I mean, I don't understand that that this means that your God is not always concrete. It's not 100%. It's not something that you can start with because you
No,
might
that
be
doesn't follow.
irrational.
Like,
This is just a denial of God's providence, right?
I don't know.
Of God's ability to give to us a word, of God's ability to give us assurance on truth. Look, okay, Joy. Look, you don't have him with a gotcha here. I mean, you really don't. I mean, maybe Ardberg. I don't know if Ardberg wants to say anything.
Well, I've got the gotcha.
I would like to hear what Ardbeg says. I just don't see what the tree you're barking up is. I don't think it's a very.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised you guys
like,
haven't
hold on,
raised the
hold on,
two
Joy,
pro quay
how
fallacy,
you
but
let's have a
debate. This
conversation.
is how you
Ardbeg was
talk
saying
to
something.
people.
Go ahead, man.
yeah, I guess in this, I should come up. Maybe there's a philosophical mindset or school of thought of how I kind of see truth in layers. But I guess with irrational, yes, I would say that we as human creatures are irrational inherently, but not completely. Like I think we are also not capable of ascertaining quote unquote truth. But I think all of us, any person we have each other. We can crowdsource, right? We can, like my wife can have a come to Jesus talk with me when I'm acting irrational and say, you're taking your anger out on the kids out of issues that are yours and not theirs. So, yeah. So I think whether it's with a common with people or reading things or even just pondering, having time to ponder it. So then obviously you guys are going to say, well, you need to. How are you going to say that humanity as a whole can do that? So, but I think that's where I would start. Is that, like, yes, we are all in this boat of at times being irrational.
Right, and it doesn't follow that and that you're completely irrational. And that's the argumentation that he's given. And if we applied it to him, then
Right.
then he's completely irrational and doesn't.
There you
Yeah.
go. No. In your mind, everyone that is not Christian and Christian belief
No, they
is
can,
irrational.
on
Period.
semantic contextual level, make rational decisions, but those rational decisions are dependent upon an ultimacy and a context. Well, what we've been
What do
talking
you
about
mean?
the whole time is that,
Well,
yeah,
no. Hold on. I want you to
to
tell me. I
have an
don't understand.
interpretation for the ultimate nature of reality, you're going to have a basis, right? Or do you need a basis when you make claims? Or can you, well, right. So
Of
when you're
course.
talking about reality and the nature of it, you're going to need a basis. You're going to need a context to provide what the actual interpretation of it actually is, not something that you make up in your mind and put at the end of the fact dependency chain and say it exists in virtue of whatever and whatever I imagine or just because or random chance universe or whatever.